A very good afternoon to all the students of class 11. Well, today we're going to take up the Browning version, and this chapter is pretty interesting. I mean, since it involves students and how students and teachers, how they get along, or how students nickname teachers, and there are various naughty little things that students usually indulge in, and so it's quite interesting. So we take up this lesson, the Browning version, written by Terence Rattingham. Okay, now in this chapter, it's basically an extract taken from the play, okay? This play established the writer, to be a great writer, a great playwright, and this is considered, as one of his best works. And this play was first performed on 8th September 1948 at London, the Phoenix Theatre, and so now we move on and we see the characters that are involved here are, we have Mr. Andrew Crocker Harris, who's a middle-aged schoolmaster. Then we have another teacher, that's Frank, who's basically a science teacher. Mr. Crocker Harris takes up classics and English. And then we have Tableau, who's one of the students. And then we also have another character, Millie, who's supposed to be Mrs. Crocker Harris. Now the play opens with a conversation that is going on between the science teacher, Mr. Frank, who's a young teacher, and Tableau, who's a student of the same school, okay? And throughout the conversation, we come to know about Mr. Andrew Crocker Harris. In the whole play, directly we do not come across the schoolmaster, Mr. Harris, but it's only through the conversation that is held between Tableau and Frank that we come to know many things about this schoolmaster. Okay. Well, the title, the Browning version, actually means that it is a translated version of the Greek tragedy Agamemnon, and it was translated by Robert Browning. And this translated version of this Greek play that was taught by Mr. Andrew Crocker Harris was gifted by Tableau to Mr. Crocker Harris when he left school. So it was a translated version, and this parting gift was considered to be a big gesture, and it is from that gesture and it is from that book that this play has got this title, the Browning version. Okay. Now, in this we see a contrast between a conventional teacher and, a younger teacher, how their views differ, and how the conventional teacher is very, is a principled man, and he goes by rules and regulations very strictly. He's impartial, he's not biased at all, and he goes according to the rules and regulations of the school. It's been mentioned that he doesn't make, announcements about the result before the scheduled date. But the other teachers somehow, they do tell the children about the result, which is supposed to be basically unethical. So we come to know many things through the conversation that is carried out between Tableau and Frank. Now, over here we can see, the agony of this teacher who's supposed to be very dedicated, who's very disciplined, very dedicated, very committed, but he is very unpopular among the students maybe because of his strictness and, the way he carries out his task, the way he teaches, his strictness. So all that is not liked by children. But just to tell you that, in the beginning, at that age, the children are quite immature to understand the importance of that firmness, the importance of that strictness. But later on, when these children grow up and, they move on and they establish themselves and they have careers, at that time, if they go back, and definitely then they do consider those strict and firm teachers, that they should get a lot of respect and reverence and a lot of love. Whereas teachers who are, who try to mix around in a very friendly manner with students, or who don't maintain their distance and who just look around for cheap popularity, as we say, So those kind do not have a lasting impression on the children. For the time being, they might be popular and they might be liked, but in the long run, with the passage of time, when these students grow up, they do realize the importance of firm and disciplined teachers, as we see in this play also. Initially, Tableau comes out with so many negative things about Mr. Crocker Harris, and he actually lists them down, that he's inhuman, he's shriveled up like a nut, and he has no feelings, and he's even worse than a sadist. He has no feelings at all, and all those kind of things. But in the end, then he does sum it up when he says that despite all that, he has a great liking for him, So that liking and that love and that respect is there. And in the play, the other science teacher, Frank, who's this young teacher, he also admits, that he is a little envious of Mr. Andrew Harris, jealous, envious of him, that despite all these things that the children do not like, but still he holds a strong position, and children are fond of him. So in the long run, it is the goodness of a person which actually pays. Okay. So, because here in this, we see, during the conversation that is being carried on, Tableau has come there. Mr. Crocker Harris has called Tableau to come in to do some work, school work. As Tableau, because of his illness, he had missed out, on the previous day. So he was so strict about the children completing their work, even though it was the last day of school. But Mr. Harris had called Tableau in, even though Tableau was very half-hearted about, coming to school. Why? Because the weather was so good, and, he could have easily played golf, and it was the last day of school. But still, he adhered. So we can say that he's an obedient student. He came there as Mr. Harris had called him in. So while he's waiting for the teacher, he comes across Mr. Frank, who is also present there at that time. And then they get into a conversation, and Mr. Frank asks him about his subjects and things like that. And, there, when they carry out the conversation, Tableau shows his dislike for Mr. Crocker Harris, and especially because he wanted to know his result, but he never disclosed the result. He never, told him about his result, unlike other teachers. And then Tableau also talks about being interested in science and not in literature, the classics, and especially the Greek tragedy, the play that they were doing, and Agamemnon. In fact, he considers it to be, a muck. But the way it was taught, it somehow did not click with the children. And more stress was laid on pronunciations and, to get the correct pronunciation and things like that, that the whole joy of reading, this Greek tragedy somehow, slipped away. So when he hears Tableau complaining about the teacher, Frank also tries to instigate him, or tries to, incite him to come out with more things about Mr. Harris. And then like he wants to know whether he beats up children or what does he do and things like that. Then Tableau, of course, says that he doesn't beat them like some of the other teachers. Now here Tableau just says some other teachers, he takes no names, he plays it safe. He does not want to take names like that. So he just plays it safe and he does not utter any names, but he says he's not like the other teachers who, believe in physical punishment or beating of children. Now here we come to know Taplow's opinion about Mr. Crocker Harris, and he calls him inhuman, okay? Though he regrets saying it, he half-heartedly, but he feels a little that whatever he has crossed the limit by, talking like that. But then when he sees the encouragement from Mr. Frank, the science teacher, then he continues. In fact, in between, he also, calls him by the name of Croc, and then he stops short. And then, of course, for that, Frank does check him and correct him. Then he imitates his teacher, he impersonates him, and the way he talks and the way he, carries out a conversation. And Frank also enjoys it thoroughly, and he finds it very entertaining and very amusing, though ethically it was totally incorrect, to let a student imitate a colleague, a person that you are who's a part of the teaching faculty, and to encourage something. And in fact, he did it once, and then Frank encourages him to do it a second time, to repeat it again, which was totally wrong. And throughout this, then Taplow, he dubs his teacher as a sadist, and he says he's more than a sadist. Sadist at least has feelings. But, sadist is a person who derives great pleasure in giving pain to others. But he says he's much more than a sadist because he has no feelings at all. He just doesn't have any feelings. That's why he calls him that he is inhuman. Then, in fact, in between, Frank tries to encourage him to tell him a little more about Mr. Harris, and then he narrates various, things that once in class he must have cracked a joke, and nobody laughed because they never understood the joke. And it was Taplow who, out of modesty, and so that the teacher would not feel bad that nobody laughed at his joke, at his poor joke, he laughs loudly. But he invites trouble for himself, because immediately Mr. Harris calls him and tells him that if you've understood the joke, that means your Latin and your thing has really improved. So you must come up, and stand in front of the class and crack it or narrate it to them or explain it to them. And here Taplow, he gets into trouble by, he was trying to do a goodwill gesture, but he got caught in that itself. And according to Frank, he admits that he's a little jealous of Mr. Harris. And because even when Taplow admits that despite all his strictness, his firmness, he likes him for his dedication. And he admits that his teacher is essentially good. So that makes Frank all the more jealous. And then he asks him to leave, towards the end. And in between, Taplow tries to tell him also that, he's coming for the remove. So Frank tells him that that's a very good thing, that maybe because he's coming to do that extra work, Mr. Harris might tell him his result, or, he might benefit from that. So to that, Taplow tells him that no, nothing of that sort would happen, because Mr. Harris has made it very clear that, he will give only what is deserved by him. Nothing, neither less nor more, just what he has earned for himself. He will get only what he deserves, So this shows us the impartial nature of Mr. Crocker Harris. Then towards the end, we see Millie Crocker coming around, and she stands there and she's looking at them, and noticing that they are in the midst of a deep conversation. And then when Taplow sees her, then he gets a little scared and frightened that she must have overheard all that he had said, and she might go and tell Mr. Harris, and then his result will be ruined. Then at that point of time, then Millie asked Tableau to go away from there. But he is too scared to do any such thing, as even Frank had told him that your teacher is late, who's so punctual, and if the teacher has come in late, so there's no need for him to wait, and he could leave. But that was something very shocking for Tableau, because he couldn't even in the wildest of his dreams think of going away from there when Mr. Harris had called him to be there. This shows his obedience again and respect that the teacher had called him in. But then when Mrs. Crocker Harris tells him to leave, he's very hesitant. But then to, give him a little reassurance, Millie Harris says that, she gives him a prescription and says, you run an errand for me and do a little small job for me. You go and fetch these medicines. And she gives him a prescription so that he moves away from there and he can go and not stand there, and be agonized by the long wait, because she tells him that her husband, Mr. Andrew Harris, is at the bursars. He's settling his finances, his accounts. So he's at the bursar and it will take some time for him to come, because they were settling all financial issues and matters, because Mr. Harris was going to leave the school, and that is why, as I told you, the parting gift that was given by Tableau to Mr. Crocker Harris was a translated version of the Greek tragic play Agamemnon, and it had been translated by Robert Browning. So that is how the title comes in. Okay. Now, if you look at the play, some of the details that are there, some of the qualities that you would think, should be there in a teacher. Of course, professional honesty. You should be very honest to your profession. So it's very, very important. Then the other things that I would list as would be, a teacher must listen well. A teacher is not only supposed to talk, but also supposed to listen. That is very, very important. To give the others a chance to speak, to know, your students, to listen to them. Then patience is another very big virtue or a quality that a teacher must have. Then communication should be very clear. Whatever you say, there should be no ambiguity. There should be clarity of thought and what you're trying to express and what you're trying to communicate or what you want your children to do. So clarity should be there. Then another very, very important thing is, a teacher should celebrate or respect a student's individuality. Okay, there are 40, 50 students in a class, and they are all different because they're all unique. Okay, so you just can't, some are bright, some are, not so bright, or some are average, and some can be a little slow learners, okay, a little weak at academics, but they may be very good in co-curricular and other activities, So a teacher has to respect a student's individuality. That is very, very important. You can't treat everybody in the same manner, or in a class you can't just pay attention to the good ones and ignore the others. In fact, it's the others who need the teacher's attention more than required. Okay. Then it's very important for a teacher to understand a student's strengths and weaknesses, So, bring up the strengths, yes, of course, and help them to get over their weaknesses, to overcome those weaknesses. Then I strongly feel that a teacher should be a role model. It's practice before you preach. So it's not only preaching and the teacher doesn't practice it herself. That's very, important, so that the children can look up to you. They can learn so much from you. They can imbibe so much from you. Because children, they are in the habit of emulating, imitating. So all good things, if you have good things in yourself, you'll be giving good things to the children also. Then very important for a teacher to be flexible and adaptable. Like here we see, he was dedicated, he was disciplined, he was strict, But at the same time, sometimes, you know, a little bit of flexibility is required, you know. You have to, I mean, see to the children's reaction and how they are receiving the lesson. If you see that there is, you know, a little bit of gap, or if you see, because a teacher looking at a student's face can immediately make out whether the child is comprehending or not. So then you either, you know, you change your method, you use other additional help, you know, to make the child or make the children understand the text or the content which you are trying to teach. And you have to adapt to various other things also and make it student friendly. It's not that it's not written anyway that a teacher has to be, you know, strict only. Like, so this part I can very well relate to Tare Zameen Par, you know, how the art teacher, how he brought out the best in that child who was finding it so difficult to cope with studies. It was stifling for him, you know. He just wanted to run away from there. But how slowly, you know, working on his strength and how he made the child learn and grasp things in an easier way. So flexibility and to be adaptable is very, very important. Then another thing, you know, based on this chapter, which I can link with, is that a teacher has to have passion for the subject that, you know, he's teaching, he or she is teaching. Like here, Frank, the science teacher, he says that, you know, he's not quite interested in his subject and he finds it difficult. Science is difficult. Now, if the teacher goes in class and says, okay, children, now we're going to do this chapter, it is very difficult, so pay attention. Now, that is a wrong thing to say, because immediately when you say it's difficult, you know, for the children, the note that is there is that it is very difficult, so they might not comprehend it, you know. So in the first go only, half the enthusiasm or their, you know, their learning prowess becomes weak. So you don't have to say that it's difficult, or you can say that it's very interesting. The concept may be a little difficult, but it's very interesting, and this is what we're going to get out of it. You know, you have to motivate them, you have to encourage them, you know. So we can say that Frank that way is not a very good teacher. And you have to promote the love of learning, okay? Because as a teacher, you are teaching. And you're not only teaching, you're learning also. Teaching is a two-way process. You're teaching also and you're learning also side by side. So you have to promote the love of learning among students also. Then another thing is that teachers must be, you know, of course, friendly but firm. You know, you have to maintain a balance between firmness and being friendly. There has to be a certain amount of decorum that you follow, and a distance has to be maintained. You cannot become over-friendly with children, you know, to that extent that, you know, they lose that respect and, you know, because after all, you know, there's an age gap and whatever it is, a certain bit of distance has to be maintained. But there in today's world, you do come across, you know, because there are young teachers and they mingle very easily with the children, and some of them maybe genuinely, you know, good at heart and trying to understand and be with the children. That's okay. But some only look for cheap popularity, you know, that they to be in the good books of the children, so that, you know, if they are not very good at their work, so, you know, their popularity with the children will cover up for their lapses, for the teacher's lapses. So that is also incorrect. So here we come across Mr. Harris, who seems to be a conventional, you know, a stereotype for a conventional teacher who had great love for, you know, his subject, and he wanted each child to be perfect. On the other hand, there's a contrast, you know, Mr. Frank, the science teacher, who does not hold, you know, rules and regulations to be very important, and he openly admits that he tells the result beforehand. So if a teacher doesn't have any scruples, then how do you expect children to actually have those values and respect for other people and other things and the system that they are working in? Okay. Then we come on to the theme that we have. Title, I told you how we've got the title of the chapter. Okay. Now, if we basically look at the themes, this is a very poignant critique of the way a person's worth is, measured by their successes and failures. It's very sad that sometimes, we are judged by our successes and failures, even though a person may be very good. Like Mr. Harris was very, very good, committed, dedicated, but then he was unpopular among the students, and as a result, when he's judged by the others, he's judged as a failure. So it's a sad part that sometimes a person is judged by his successes and failures, and somehow these two qualities, successes and failures, they sometimes govern or overpower an individual's life and way of being. So basically, successes and failures should not be a yardstick to measure a person's, individuality or his whatever he's doing, his profession or whatever. Sometimes things just don't happen to be going the right way. So that doesn't mean that the person is a failure. No, because after failure, one who actually gets up and moves on and has the vision to succeed definitely is a better person than one who doesn't even try or who just gives up, the first time that he sees failure. Now, the other point is age and change. The other theme that is here is age and change. Now, in this play, the writer has made a very effective use of characters, different ages, to show the distinct stages in an individual's life and the way these ages affect people psychologically. For example, Tableau is a student at that age. What is his psychology? Okay. Then we come on to Frank, that young teacher. What is his psychology? Then a little older than that, and that is Mr. Harris. What is his psychology? So age and change is a major theme. Okay. Now, as Mr. Harris, we know, is leaving school, and a new teacher has been appointed in his place, and because I've read the play, so I can tell you a little more than that. And that little that teacher has already come in, and the accommodation that was occupied by Mr. Harris has already been allotted to the new teacher. And this for Mr. Harris was a little insulting, and he felt that nothing can be done, and what Rattigan has actually clearly shown by this move is that paradoxically the only constant in life is change. Okay, change is the only constant phenomena. So like he was leaving, then a new teacher comes in, he had to vacate that accommodation and somebody else will come in and occupy it. So the writer has categorically brought out this, that the only constant in life is change. Then the next one I would say is like Andrew Harris or Crocker Harris. He's portrayed as a teacher from a different generation. Okay, and his strict and stern manner perplexes the students. Okay, they don't like it. And the younger generation, they prefer younger teachers who are not so strict, or in today's language, as we can say, teachers who are cool, cool teachers, who, sometimes want to be popular and be liked by the children, and they don't maintain an atmosphere of formality or rules and regulations. They don't violate them. They violate them, okay? And they don't care much for those rules and regulations. Now this boy Frank, so he, Mr. Harris is a conventional teacher, okay? And naturally children prefer younger teachers. Then the younger teacher Frank, who's the science teacher, he actually encouraged Tableau to imitate Mr. Harris, clearly shows the difference between the two teachers. how Mr. Harris conducted himself, and he was a self-disciplined man in contrast to Frank, the younger teacher, who did not exhibit or did not showcase or did not, prove to be a dignified and disciplined person or disciplined behavior in front of a student. You have to maintain a certain kind of a decorum. Like you can't suddenly start, a teacher can't suddenly start behaving like teenagers in front of the students. That's totally incorrect, especially in a formal atmosphere. Okay, outside school, if there's a party or something, okay, that's understood, that's totally different. But when you are in a formal atmosphere, in a formal environment or in school, then you do have to maintain. Even outside, you do need to maintain that distance, okay? So here we can see that age does play a role categorically, and otherwise also as depicted in the play. It also, has weightage in real life. Now, next point is, Mr. Harris basically is a teacher of classics, okay, the study of antiquity, which is based on ancient Greece and Rome. Then, just as he is teaching, antiquity and things like that, he is also considered to be old and insignificant. Just as they are studying about the past that is dead. Of course, it's there, but it's a dead past, okay? And but there is, so the same way, Mr. Harris is also considered to be a man of the past kind, that he's not, a person of the present times. But here I would like to say that, there is another angle to this, okay? One angle that he's a man of the past, old thoughts, old school of thought, and, very conventional and things like that. But then there is another angle to the study of classics. There are two angles, okay? One, about the past, which is, why should we delve into the past? We should consider about the present only, or we should think about the future. But the other angle over here is a study of the classics can also project at saving the past from being thought of as old and irrelevant. The old classic that he was teaching, okay, the Greek play that he was doing with them, okay. So that had another connotation that, to keep that past alive, it was very, very important that past is taught in the present, okay, and that all that was there in the past is not old and irrelevant. And it's a study of the past on which the present stands. Like, so many things, even in the Indian context, if you see, there were so many kinds of, things that are slowly dying out, like old kinds of embroidery and old kinds of, craftsmanship and all, great traditional work that was there. And because modern things have come in, so they have almost been wiped out. But there are, certain people, there is a certain section of society who still want all those things to carry on, because that is our rich, cultural heritage that we have, and we must not let that die out. We must keep that thing going, and all those old traditions and things that are there, not only in terms of clothes and jewelry and in craftsmanship, but other various things also. Things that were simple and but very beautiful. And you can see that, we ourselves in our own country may not be knowing so much about all these things, but these foreigners, they take so much interest that when they come to India, they want to visit all those places and they want to get a know-how of all those intricate and beautiful things that were a part of the Indian culture. So that is another angle to it. Then, as I told you about the title, I've already told you. Now here we can say that Mr. Harris was also a very dedicated and committed teacher, and he took his work very, very seriously. What proof do we have for that? Like Taplow had missed one day because of his illness, but Mr. Harris ensured that Taplow came to him and he finished off what he had missed out on, you know. Even though it was the last day of school, it wouldn't have mattered, and as it is, Mr. Harris was leaving. But he saw to it that he did not leave anything that was a part of his responsibility to be left unfulfilled. And as I told you, Frank, on the other hand, was not such a dedicated teacher. In fact, he demoralized the students from joining the science stream, and he said that things are very difficult. That's not the way, you know. You have to encourage children. Even if the thing is difficult, the teacher has to find ways and means of making that content interesting and making the children realize that nothing is difficult, okay? Like all children, it's very common, even it was a part of us also when we were growing up, when we were students. One very common thing is, I hate maths, I hate history. Now why do you hate it? Because you find it difficult and you can't solve it. The minute you overcome that, everything becomes so interesting. You loathe something, you hate something, you dislike something, and then you begin to fear it, okay? Because you fear it, you hate it. So once you overcome that fear for a subject, automatically you develop a great liking for it, you know? Like for maths, if you sit down and you solve a sum, and you've been trying very hard, and suddenly you were able to, and then you check on the answer and you see that you have been able to solve it, how thrilled you are. And that thrill is something, that joy is something, you know, so beautiful. And immediately your mind says, yes, let me solve a few more, you know. So that is the encouragement, that is the motivation that one should have for a subject, okay. All right, now let's come on to the question and answers, please. Comment on the attitude shown by Taplow towards Crocker Harris. Now, Taplow has a little strange attitude towards Crocker Harris, though he says that he does not like Mr. Harris, and you know, especially because he had called him in for extra work on the last day of his school, and then he had not even revealed the result until the last day. Because Mr. Harris is a strict disciplinarian, and he worked very, very hard, and he followed all rules and regulations very strictly. But still, then he also says that he's not a sadist, and he's one step ahead of that also, because a sadist has feelings, but he has no feelings at all. He shows no feelings. And then, he would just do what he felt like, and, he would not have any pity or concern or any sympathy towards, Taplow also, like when he asked him about his result, and, so things like that. So on one side, we have negativity, he says, talks about many negative things, but after saying all that, then in the end, he does admit to Frank, the science teacher, that he likes him and he respects him. So mixed feelings are there. That is why we say that his feelings are a little strange. What do you think about Crocker Harris from the play? Now, Crocker Harris is a middle-aged teacher. He and his students are afraid of him. They're scared of him, no doubt, that his students are very scared, and they are not free with him, okay? But despite all this, they still like him. And Mr. Harris does not relish flattery at all. He's a strict disciplinarian, okay? And he's not prejudiced at all. Like he said, I'll give you only what you have earned, neither more nor less. So, very strict and disciplined, okay? And he follows all rules and regulations very strictly. The results are supposed to be announced on the last day by the school, by the headmaster, so he does not indulge in any unethical activity or announce the results before the time period, okay? And he takes his job very seriously, as he had called Taplow even on the last day. and he's very committed, he's very dedicated, and he wants the children to be perfect, you know, in their pronunciation, whatever he's teaching them. He wants the children to be absolutely sure and perfect. Okay. All right. Then next question. Who is Frank? What impression do you form about him? Now, Frank is a science teacher, and he's a young teacher, and he does not know Tableau, who was in the lower 5th standard. But even then he tries to instigate Tableau against Crocker Harris, and he's full of jealousy and prejudice. He does not seem to be objective and sincere, because a teacher who can instigate a child against a colleague speaks volumes about the person's character itself. Okay. What is remove? What does Tableau think about it? The certificate which one gets on passing a class in school is known as a remove, and as a rule it was declared by the headmaster. Now Tableau is not sure of getting a remove, as his teacher Mr. Harris is not in the habit of telling the result beforehand, like the other teachers. Why has Tableau come to see Crocker Harris? Tableau couldn't attend the school for a day due to his illness. So Mr. Crocker Harris ensured that Tableau came to him and completed the assigned work, you know, whatever he wanted him to do, even though it was the last day of school. Does Tableau like the subject taught by Mr. Harris? Tableau quite likes the play, the plot and everything, but but somehow the way it is taught and the way it is projected and the way it is delivered, you know, somehow did not fascinate him much. Then on the other hand, another reason is that he was more interested in science, and that is why he calls the Greek play muck. And muck means something that is, you know, useless and unwanted. Okay. Next question. Frank says, bad luck. Still there's one comfort. What is bad luck and what is the comfort? This was a part of the conversation. Frank says that it is the bad luck of Tableau to come into school for extra work on the last day of the school, and that also because the weather was too good. But the comfort for him would be that he had been a good boy, and then he would definitely get his remove. Okay. Tableau calls Crocker Harris hardly human. Why? Now Tableau says that Mr. Crocker Harris does not have any feelings, and despite the fact that you know, Tableau had taken in extra work from Mr. Harris, even then he would not give him more than what he deserved. Okay, so that's why he says that he's hardly human. Did Frank like Tableau imitating Crocker Harris? Yes, Frank definitely liked Tableau imitating Mr. Harris. That is why he asked him to imitate him or impersonate him again. He only pretended to show his dislike and was trying to snub Tableau for this imitation, but in his heart of hearts, he was enjoying it thoroughly. Why was Tableau shocked? Now, Frank gave a suggestion at that time to Tableau to cut Crocker Harris. That means to go away from there and not continue to wait for him, because Mr. Harris himself was late by 10 minutes. Now, this suggestion by Frank to Tableau to go away from there shocked Tableau, because he could not ever think of disobeying his teacher. Why does Frank envy Crocker Harris? Frank admits, you know, that he envies Crocker Harris for having an effect on the boys, you know. All the boys seem to be scared of him, but you know, at the same time, when the boys gave him so much of respect, then that made him a little envious of Mr. Harris. Why doesn't Tableau call Crocker Harris a sadist? As I told you, a sadist is a person who derives pleasure by giving pain to others. But he says he's not even a sadist. Why? because Taplow says that Crocker Harris is not even a sadist, and because he had no feelings at all. So he doesn't get any pleasure out of the pain of others. So it would be wrong to call him a sadist, a person who has some feelings. What, according to Taplow, is unnatural about Crocker Harris? Now, during the conversation, Taplow had told Frank that Mr. Harris is, shriveled up inside like a nut, and he seems to hate people who like him. Now, this was something very strange, because all of us, want to be admired, want to be appreciated, and you feel good when you're liked by other people. So this was very strange that Mr. Harris, he did not like to be liked by others, okay? And he seemed to hate people who liked him. So it's natural for others to be loved and liked, but for Mr. Harris, this was something which he did not appreciate of and did not like at all. So that was something very unnatural for a human being. Okay, what is funny about Taplow's attitude towards Crocker Harris? Now, this is the same thing. Despite the various reasons that he enlisted for Mr. Harris, for not liking Mr. Harris, in the end, he cannot help saying that he liked him. And this is funny, because after all that he had, spoken about him, then he contradicted his own words by saying that he liked him. Okay. Now, what was funny about Crocker Harris telling the joke? Now, Crocker Harris one day, he cracked one of his classical jokes in class, but nobody laughed because nobody understood it, okay? So Taplow laughed, as I told you, a mark of respect and, very out of modesty, because he did not want Mr. Harris to feel bad that nobody laughed at his joke. So, but, he put himself into hot waters because Mr. Harris asked Taplow to explain the joke to the other students. And obviously, when he did not know it himself, he did not understand it himself, what was he going to tell the class? How does Millie, or Crocker Harris's wife, send Taplow away? Now, Millie asked Taplow if he was waiting for Mr. Harris, her husband, and then she tells Taplow that Mr. Harris was busy with the bursar and that he might be a little late because he was settling his finances. So she suggests to Taplow that he should, leave. But Taplow was very hesitant, and earlier Mr. Frank had also given him the same suggestion, to which he had expressed utter shock. So he was again very hesitant, and he did not want to take a risk of moving away without meeting Mr. Harris. So in order to make him a little more comfortable, Millie gives him a prescription of a doctor and asks him to get the medicine. In this way, she sends Taplow away. Okay. Next question. I think this is almost a repeat. What do you think about Crocker Harris from the play? Now, Crocker Harris, who teaches Latin and classical literature at the British Public School, he is basically a good teacher. He's very disciplined, very firm, and he does not beat his students. Because earlier corporal punishment was allowed, which today is, of course, not at all, recommended at all, and it's dangerous because the teacher can be behind bars. Okay. Of course, he does punish them for the mistakes in his own way. Taplow had to come in even on the last day of school to do some extra work. Now, Mr. Crocker Harris is a stickler for accuracy and discipline. Okay. He expects his students to study very hard and not to play the fool. And the classics had a lot of Greek words. And he punished those boys if they could not get them right. And he wanted them to get the correct pronunciation bang on, And he's a strict follower of rules. He did not disclose the result to the children beforehand, because it was the headmaster who announced the results on the last day of the term. So he was very, ethical that way. Then it was very unfortunate that the others did not, appreciate the qualities of strictness and discipline. And, students like Taplow call him inhuman and even worse than a sadist and things like that, And unfortunately, even Frank, the teacher at the same school, he seemed to enjoy, the low opinion of the boy about Mr. Crocker Harris. A comment on the attitude which was shown by Taplow towards Crocker Harris. All that he said basically, Taplow had bitter feelings for the teacher, Like other students, he does not like the strictness in the class and the minute observance of school rules. He's a student in the lower 5th grade. He wants to know about his result, but the teacher, unlike his other colleagues, did not declare the class result, which was to be announced by the headmaster on the last day of the term. So Taplow is bitter because he continues to be bitter because even on the last day he's been called in. And then Taplow also, finds fault with the way the teacher teaches the classics, like this play that they're talking about, the Agamemnon. He gave a lot of Greek words, and punished them if they did not get it right. And then he also calls him inhuman, emotionless, and withered like a dried up nut. And he also imitates his voice and even uses the short form to take his name by calling him Crock. Okay. Next question. Does Frank seem to encourage Taplow's comments on Crocker Harris? Frank is also a school teacher and a science teacher, and like many of his colleagues, he too does not seem to like Mr. Harris. And when he realizes the bitterness of the student, Taplow, for Crocker Harris, he encourages him, indirectly to give vent to his feelings, to bring out all the ill feelings that he had in his heart, and express them. He pretends to console him by saying that he's a good boy who has come in to do extra work. But inwardly, he feels very happy when the boy expresses his dislike of Crocker Harris and is giving him extra work on the last day of school. Then Taplow imitates him, but he pretends to dislike it and tries to snub him and ask him to be quiet also. Then he also, in a way, indirectly encourages Taplow to disobey his teacher by suggesting that he should go away from there because the teacher is late and that he should go off and play golf. But Taplow does not take this suggestion. He's too scared to defy his teacher's wishes. Okay. So Mr. Frank, the science teacher, is not a good human being, is not a good teacher at all, because he went against the rules of the school, he went against his, his conduct also, encouraging a child to belittle his own colleague. Okay. Next is a short character sketch of Frank. Now, Frank is a young teacher who teaches science at the school where Taplow is a student. Though he is young, he's not enthusiastic regarding his career as a teacher. When Taplow shows his interest in opting for science, he sadly remarks, "We get all the slackers." Now, that's not so. In fact, people have a wrong notion. They think that all the intelligent ones go to the science stream. Though, of course, now we are trying. Now things are changing, and people feel that arts is also equally important. So basically, he himself is not interested, and that's the way he brings about, the whole thing onto the science stream. Frank is an envious character. He's jealous of Mr. Harris, and he admits it openly that despite all the shortcomings that the children feel that Mr. Harris has, they still respect him a lot. He pretends to be what he is not. He's not sincere towards his profession and even towards his students. He can be called a foil to Mr. Crocker Harris. They are a total contrast. We get the information about the idealism and impartiality of Mr. Harris through Tableau and Mr. Frank's conversation, and when we compare the two teachers, so the goodness of Mr. Harris can be seen compared to the shallowness that is there in Frank's principles. Next is, what do you think about Tableau? Tableau is a young boy of 16. He's in the lower 5th grade. He wants his result and he's anxious to get his result because then he would be able to opt for the science stream instead of, classics. Then, like many other students, Tableau, he misjudges Crocker, Harris, his teacher, and he calls him, I don't want to repeat the same thing, he calls him inhuman, he calls him worse than a sadist, and that he's totally emotionless, dried up, shriveled up like a nut. But then he soon realizes his mistake and he asks for an apology from the teacher. Then he's an obedient student. He comes in even on the last day. He adheres to, the wishes of his teacher. And when Frank says that they get all he's bold also. Bold in the sense, when Frank says that they get all this, the slackers, all the idlers in the science stream, he immediately objects and he says that he has opted for science because he is genuinely interested in science. So he did not take it lying down, he did not let him, let that sweeping statement go past him, Then he is very sincere. Though he dislikes some of the habits of his teacher, he confesses that he still likes him, though he himself does not know why. Now, what is the main idea of the play? The play deals with the idea that, those who stick to principles, they often come to grief, that they have to pay for their firmness, or they have to pay for their principles. The people who make no compromises, make themselves unpopular and unwanted. It is ironic that the unprincipled, they have all the benefits. The teacher, Crocker Harris, is strict and uncompromising, even though he does not, beat his students, but he still remains unpopular. So it is a sad part, that he then, when he leaves school and, he's going with a heavy heart kind of a thing, But the consolation is that, Tableau's hidden respect and regard for the teacher do come out in the open towards the end. And students like him, as I told you in the beginning, they realize the worth of their sincere teachers quite late in life. Okay? So, that is that. I think I have covered most of the things, the question answers, the character sketches, and whatever the chapter conveyed. So thank you very much for watching, listening, and I hope if you have any difficulties, please pen them down in the comment section. So please do give in your appreciation by your likes, okay, and do share the video with others. God bless you all, children.